Okay, so hello everyone that may be watching this, assuming this is the one that actually works. I think with this cool new map that we have for Arena, that, or I decided that I'm gonna make some strategy content. This is quite advanced strategy content, so probably not the best if it's your first Terra Mystica strategy content that you're ever watching, or if you're not. It's mostly aimed at people like 400 plus ELO on BGA to that maybe have a good understanding of the base map for Terra Mystica, but maybe not this new Fire and Ice one. And we're going to talk about, in this video, the differences between the maps. So I'm planning on maybe doing a few more uploads. So this one will be general tips on what differs from the base map. However, I'm also planning on doing potentially a faction tier list and also placements and key hexes for most colors on the map. These two might be in the same video depending on how much I want to go into detail and see whether it's going to end up being like a 50-minute video if I do both. Oh, sorry. And we're also going to look through some games potentially as a third one in the series to get some points across. Now we're going to start by comparing this map to the base map of Terra Mystica. And we're going to use the witches as an example because I think they just are a relatively vanilla faction. It's not like we're going to be saying, oh, the treasurers do this and this on base, but not Fire and Ice. Whereas the witches can be quite a good example for the main points of the map. So witches might start here and here on the base map, and you might notice that a common witches plan would be to dig some. They have lots of nice cheap hexes that they can dig to found 2 towns and get their natural greens, or get 2 natural greens. And this is digging to hexes is quite a good way of building out your stuff, and you get towns. So unless you're in a rough color wheel, or maybe it's clear that you want to go for shipping, digging is quite a good plan. And staying on one ship the whole game as witches is quite doable. You can ship to this north stretch for a third town, and you can also just connect with one ship if you dig this grey. And even if you maybe are in a bit of a rough color wheel, you have tons of connection options. So obviously there's this really simple one where you just the green arrows where you just build here and 3 ships. So you do need 3 ships, so it's maybe not ideal. Maybe if this gray's gone, you can dig the gray and the blue and then build this green, and that's a 2 ship connection. Or if somehow this green disappears, you can 3 ship connect from the blue. If you also manage to lose the G3 green. These yellow arrows also show like maybe greys in the game and they temp shipped round 1 to dig that green. You can go around the long way and connection is still pretty alive. It's quite a friendly map. It's quite easy to connect, or for base map at least. Whereas Fire and Ice, digging is a lot harder. So if you're starting here and here, you only really have 1 town that you can dig, and you don't get any naturals with no shipping. Obviously, if you start in the west over here, you can get 2 hexes for 1 dig, which is better than anything on base map. However, you do need to start in the west for that, and that's generally not going to have much leech. However, while base shipping is still quite good on Fire and Ice. Base map shipping options and Fire and Ice shipping options are pretty similar for green. So it's much more common if base map temple 3 dwellings with 1 ship is quite a common opening. On Fire and Ice, I'd say it's even more common. On base map, generally you'd pick something like work power, priest over temp ship, whereas I think on Fire and Ice you're only really picking the spade over temp ship round 1. You often need 3 ship to connect. There's not many 1 ship witches games. It's normally either 3 shipping or just not connecting and making this 3 towns, 4 towns disconnected games. Whereas base map, I pointed out a relatively common build order where you can play on 1 or 2 ships. And then your connection is a lot less friendly as well. So I've X'd out 4 hexes, and you can sort of see if these 4 hexes go, weird. How do you play the game? So as witches, this is where you probably just build the stronghold, maybe fly to the west, and maybe make 3 towns disconnected. As something like Orin or Chashdala, it's pretty difficult. You can't connect, you can't really expand. It's a much less friendly map than Basement. So what's the conclusions from this? Well, we need shipping earlier is the biggest conclusion. It's harder to get dwellings with digging, whereas shipping stays relatively the same, or is maybe even a little bit more lucrative in the hexes you can get from it. We likely need 3 shipping anyway, so it's much less bad to get some of that out of the way early. And securing hexes is a lot more important. On base, you can just mess around, take Earth 1, build up bunch of temples or something for building your dwellings. Whereas here we need to be getting out early so that we can actually get these important hexes, because there's a lot more key hexes on this map and there's a lot less substitutions that we can make. So the first strategy point is that you're generally shipping around earlier than base map. And I would say this is true for all colors. I mean, maybe not all factions, because like fakirs and dwarves, and I'm not saying that every game you should be upgrading shipping around 3 or something. And I'm not saying that, like, every single game, if you played the equivalent game on base map, you're going to be upgrading shipping earlier. It's a general trend across all colors. But what do we do with that? Because the strategy point that I'm giving you is not saying you should be shipping, because I, I trust everyone to pick when they should be shipping on a game by game basis, but a lot of things that people maybe don't understand is that we do need to base our game plan, around this earlier shipping that we're going to have to do. So firstly, we need to fund it, which makes things like Fire 1 a little bit better, Earth 1 a little bit worse on this map compared to base. I think, generally, if you're taking Earth 1 round 1, maybe 15-20% of the time in base map, it's probably more like 5-10, probably 10-15% of the time on Fire and Ice. It's not a huge difference. And also, if your default wasn't Fire 1 on base map, I think for me it was probably Fire 1 if I didn't have a great option, but it should definitely be Fire 1 on this map, especially with factions that maybe would normally go for something else. Like Fire 1 Halflings are almost a joke on base map, whereas here they're very, very strong. It also makes things like the dig power actions a bit less sought after, but the coins, the priest, and I also got the bridge because it's not quite as good as a shipping, but this is also a very high bridge pressure map that's sort of a different point. More valuable early on. And then also the coins tiles, the priest, and the temporary shipping. Shipping scoring is huge on this map. I think if it's one, maybe on base map, whoever passed on the big building tile the most might be a predictor of who wins. It's obviously not going to be 100% accurate, but like maybe 33% of games, whoever passes on the big building tile the most wins. Completely wild estimate here, no stats to back me up. On Fire and Ice, the equivalent would be the shipping scoring tile, because almost everyone is going to have 1 shipping. A lot of people are going to have 3 shipping somewhat quickly. It does adjust faction strength. However, as I said, I was going to talk about colors and faction strength in a later video, so I'm not going to go onto that too much, but just for now, in auction evaluations, factions that naturally like shipping are going to be a little bit stronger. So Chaos Magicians, the game plans that we do on Fire and Ice, really naturally suit Chaos Magicians play. Mermaids, obviously, starting with 1 shipping is amazing on this map. They're one of the strongest factions. 2 temple openings are also more prevalent, which is it's mostly because 2 priest income means you can do 2 ship much quicker. I know I said earlier witches can't mess around building lots of temples, but that was more like temple round 1, temple round 2, whereas 2 temples is very good for getting your shipping up quickly. Now, this was me trying to get some empirical evidence for this, however, it kind of didn't work super well. I was expecting that, so I've made this big table of two ship, two dig. This is what you have, and this is how many hexes you get on either map. I was expecting Fire and Ice would blow base map out of the water. However, base map is actually a hit on a few factions and colors shipping lanes. So, for example, this box would say that black, with one ship and one dig, the most hexes they can get would be 3 on Fire and Ice and 2 on base map. So it's maybe a little bit better to go for one ship, one dig early on as black. Now, again, it's not a huge piece of evidence, but what I'm trying to point out is that you can get quite good value off shipping. So obviously, one ship with no digs isn't the hugest value, but once you start getting to one ship and 2 digs, you can do quite strong dwelling rushes with all colors, although you can also do that on base map. The orange highlighted boxes are where Fire and Ice has more hexes, and the blue highlighted boxes are where base map has more hexes. And there are a little bit more orange boxes than blue boxes, but this evidence isn't really that great. Another point is this asterisk is you need to do some quite questionable placements to get this maximum amount of hexes. So here, for example, for grey to get 2 hexes within 3 shipping, I'm pretty sure they need to place like C2 and G1 to be able to do this. And here for green to get 4 new hexes of 2 digs and 0 shipping, they need to place on D9 and D3 on Fire and Ice. This box I was expecting base would be significantly ahead of Fire and Ice, because my idea was that digging to hexes is a better on base than on Fire and Ice. And I think it's sort of true. Both yellow and green, which are the ones where Fire and Ice gives you more hexes off digs, you need to place in slightly not so meta placements to access these free hexes, whereas black, brown, and grey on base map, I think most people will know exactly where I'm talking about in the East continent, or black actually has one in the West too, where there's lots of leech there and they can easily get tons of hexes early from digging. Now my next point is, I think Fire and Ice lends itself to creative game plans more than base map. This may be a bit controversial, but it is one of the reasons why I really like this map. It's my favorite map. So the type map leads to more creative starting placement opportunities. So here we have engineers that have placed D2 and G3. And the reason for this is there's actually quite a lot of grey hexes over here. It's just not common. Normally you place E5. But here I wanted to get network points in this game. So I was like, I'm going to go for the less contested hexes and I'm going to split the map with witches. And I'm pretty sure I got second this game, so maybe not the best example, but grinding out of tough spots generally requires creativity. So here we have Jekyll's Cultists in round 2. I'm going to link most of these games that I got the images from. They ended up having to do a triple dig first action round 2, which was a very creative line, and it ended up winning her the game. And it was not looking so good for her in round 1, but she has had another game where she triple dug round 2 and 1, I think, at Terra Mysticon, but this one really shone out to me as a pretty rough position in the first round, and the triple dig was quite clearly the winning move, I thought. Lots of leech allows explosive openings, which means, more resources, more creative things to do. So here we have Stronghold, Temple, One Dwelling, and a random bridge giants in round 1, because they just got so much leech. And they also took Water 2 with their Temple. And this was a win for the Giants, which is pretty cool, winning with Temple Water 2. And lower scoring games mean winning with spicy games is easier, so this game wasn't actually a win. And I realize now that I've cut off the stats row that tells you what the stats actually are, but this bottom row is dwellings built. So Patrick of the Isles was 3 points away from winning, with 6 structured wars, which is pretty insane to me. And I think a lot of spicy games tend to be a somewhat safe, like, 130s to 150s. You don't tend to have a really spicy game plan that scores a 180. And the map is generally a little bit lower scoring than base map. So 150s to 160s is a lot more winnable. It's a very safe second if you can hit that with quite consistency. Whereas on base map, that could easily be a second or third. Now, my third point, and I'm doing a bit less detail into these last 2 points than the first shipping point, because I think that might be the biggest strategy point that people miss on Fire and Ice, is to play it safe. So, the map favors a good overall game plan, predicting opponents' moves, and finding ways to score in rough situations over maximizing your resources. So, I think this is a bit of a playstyle thing. I think another reason why I like the map is I'm quite good at games such as Mega Sandwiches, where it's quite important to make sure people are gonna like you bid the faction that you think's gonna get away with the game. And I know people sometimes don't like them because they're swingy, but I find them a lot easier in a sense to predict than, for example, who's getting one upgrade round one for Leech, and that small bit of extra Leech is going to win the game. So here we have an example where Colas just placed D6 as Atlanteans, and he's never going to connect this. He's never going to get his shipping bonus, he's never going to get his 2 steps up each cult, he's never going to get the big 20 points, but he's going to get Leech. And this was a really nice, playing it safe game plan. Instead of placing somewhere else where he might not have neighbors, and his game is somewhat at the mercy of whether he's going to be able to get like key hexes to bridge his stronghold in. He's just like, nope, I'm just going to take this leech and I'm just going to play a more vanilla blue faction game. And he ended up winning this. I sort of already covered this, but they're normally decided over bigger things, such as early hexes and connection. So here we have 2 games, or the score sheet from 2 games. Now this was the first season of Fire 2 Open, where in all the games of Fire 2 Open, or each round of Fire 2 Open, sorry, they played 1 game on the base map and 1 game on the Fire and Ice map. And this was the final, with Nerdcube Ondas is this numbers mess. I think that's because this account got deleted, so it's reverted to numbers. Fatty B and Heifer. So obviously, super strong table. And this left one was on the base map. And as you can see, these scores are very close, or somewhat close. And this game likely came down to something like Nerdcube maybe optimized his coins a little bit better, he scored a bit more points, he maybe gotten a bit luckier with Leech. Whereas this Fire and Ice one, the scores are a lot more far apart. So Ondas potentially won this one because he saw that one faction was going to get more hexes than the others had expected in the auction, or maybe he secured a key hex at the right time and other people missed their key hexes, or maybe he managed to squeeze out a town that people weren't expecting, and Nerdcube down here ended up taking 4th. I remember this is quite a rough Alchemist's game, where again, he maybe was busy focusing on maximizing his workers early game and wasn't really realizing that some of his hexes were under threat, and it ended up costing him the game, and the Fire to Open tournament actually, because he'd won the first game. Playing it safe and making sure you get your hexes pays off over games. On base map, where you're unlikely to be punished, it's quite good to be really greedy. Hang your hex for the coins action, hang your hex for Earth 1, hang your hex for even just the 2 extra points you get building a dwelling with Earth 1. On Fire and Ice, it's a lot easier to get punished, and punishing generally hurts you a lot more. So one thing is, when black and green are in the game, this D6 hex in the center of the mat is huge for black, and I think you should be taking it first action almost every game if you're black against green. I don't think green should take it first action, but I think black should, just in case green goes for it. And this should be done before you upgrade trading post for extra leech or secure a power action. And then the inverse of this, cutting, I'm gonna say take this with a grain of salt. Cutting other players is generally not the best plan at all. However, if it's a relatively bad plan on base map to just slightly hurt yourself to block someone, it's a less bad plan on Fire and Ice. Because you can block someone a lot harder than you can on base map at a similar cost to yourself. So do keep your eyes open for somewhere you can cut an opponent if it's quite clearly just you and them in the game and you think that will help you win. And it's generally going to be much more likely that cutting will be a winning move on this map than on base map. So I'm gonna switch to a BGA replay and we're gonna go to one replay to showcase some of the mostly the playing it safe and play creative points, because I actually think in this replay I didn't upgrade shipping until round 6. So I'm going to go to the end of the game because I can't be bothered clicking next move too many times. But this game is a huge mega sandwich. And we have a dig round 4 with tons of cult workers coming in. And pretty low scoring tiles. So I think the dig round 4 is going to be a huge way to score points here. And the halflings for 34, alchemists for 26, nomads for 40, and giants for 40. I'll also point out this is a really strong table, sorry. Sevok on the giants, and Minnow, who's also like 500 plus on the halflings. So I'm going to go at a relatively quick pace because I don't want this video to be too long. But one thing that a lot of people might do is they might go Temple Earth 1 and then Stronghold round 2 and 3 for their Nomads game. And while that could work, you can connect for a big network, 3 towns, it's a bit risky. Nomad's connection can be quite dicey, like I'm going to need to 3-ship up to the north. I've got Earth 1, it's going to be hard to fund my shipping as well early, and it's quite easy to lose hexes. So instead, I go Temple Air 2 and send a priest to Air. And, well, I guess I'll just let some of the further moves play out. But basically, my plan is to zoom up this Air cult, and then get tons of workers and hit the dig round. Now, I think this game plan would be less strong on base map because the Earth 1 Stronghold Towns line is a lot more likely to work out. Whereas if I do it on Fire and Ice, I'm probably going to be disconnected. Then some of the benefits of having a big econ from the Nomad Stronghold are not going to be as apparent because I'm going to be losing network. Whereas this dig round 4 line, it's going to be quite consistently, I'm going to score a ton of points in round 4. And that is the basis for a lot of creative games, in my opinion, is you're looking for a slightly different way to score than usual. So, Nomads hitting the dig round is not super common. Especially because they've got the stronghold that gets them hexes. Although, granted, I think the Nomad stronghold is a bit better on Fire and Ice than base generally. So, we're going to be smashing this dig round with tons of workers, and another thing is it's going to showcase the lower scoring games, or slightly lower scoring games on Fire and Ice. I actually think, given that Xevok's the main opponent with a really cool Earth 2 Giants game, by the way, he's maybe scored a bit more due to this being on Fire and Ice than base, because Giants are a little bit better. But if you're digging round 4, you're going to score lots of points in dig round 4, but you're not going to have a ton in the tank for round 5 and round 6. So if it's a map with quite high points, or with quite high scores, sorry, you're maybe going to just get past. If I end up with 100 points by the end of round 4, and then I'm only scoring 30 with the rest of the game, on Fire and Ice, that might be enough. On base map, it might not be enough, because everyone's had a strong game. People are getting 3 towns, whereas on Fire and Ice, there very well might be a lot more jockeying for space, especially in this mega sandwich. I actually think people got along quite well overall in this specific game. So let's see. Also, passing on to the dwelling, scoring for lots of points. So I'm not trying to showcase, oh, I played really well, I beat Zivok. I'm trying to showcase that things like creative game plans and also safe game plans where we're not necessarily planning to have a big network, we need a lot of key hexes. If you're upgrading digging, you don't really care about your naturals, you're greeting tons of points, so it doesn't really matter if you get locked off connection. It's pretty easy to just brute force your towns, like a triple dig and a double dig here. So it's quite a safe game plan. I mean, I personally think it's quite a cool game plan, and I will say I did win this game, so I'm not gonna try and not spoil the end of the game or anything. But Halflings have a similar game plan. They've also done the Sank for Earth 1, which did cost them a lot of work as the dig ground, but it also scored them a lot of points from the Earth 1 itself. And I actually have more points than Halflings here, which I was quite happy with. So, I don't know, I guess we can just watch the rest of this game, because I think it's a good showcase of how playing creative and playing safe can pay off a lot more on this map than France. Now, no, on this map than base map, sorry. Now, about the shipping point that I had earlier on, obviously we aren't doing much shipping this game, but in fact no one's done much shipping. Xivok's still on 0 shipping, Alchemists are only on 1 shipping, which is a slight quirk of Alchemists on this map. They can play 1 ship quite well, and Halflings are also on 1 shipping. So obviously I'm not really showing that, oh, you should be shipping, but hopefully I guess, points about digging to hexes being a bit harder. It's a bit harder to make towns, so shipping's more important. Shipping scoring is huge because it's a lower scoring map. If the average score's 140, 9 points is quite a good chunk of that, whereas, I mean, it's still a good chunk of 150, but it's just that little bit more, which could change valuation slightly, I'd say. So I didn't really want to click through this whole game, mostly to save time, but I think I can still somewhat get the point across that if I was playing, say, as I said, Earth 1, Stronghold, 3 Towns Nomads game, this hex is gone, this hex is gone. It would have been it would be quite hard to connect around this way because I'm in a sandwich and halflings are on E6, so I might need to double dig and 3 shipping, whereas this way I've just abandoned C5 as a leech hex, which it did do its job quite well. So, about the faction strength that I was also going to say, the factions that like shipping are stronger because the natural pace of Fire and Ice goes well with the natural game plan of those factions. One thing is that alchemists on this map tend to dig a lot more, which is weird because they're a faction that's very shipping oriented. but I think that's sort of just how the black hexes have been put out. But one thing is that it makes witches, nomads, chaos magicians, and mermaids somewhat on par with cultists, darklings, and engineers. So, at least without the fan factions in, one thing that I've always liked about this map is that there's not really an S tier faction. If I had to put my bet on the strongest base faction on Fire and Ice, I think I would bet on mermaids. So I know it's different to the usual cultists and darklings on base map, and I think all 7 of those factions are pretty even in terms of faction strength. Maybe nomads and engineers are a bit lower than the other 5. But I think it's quite cool that all the colors, or at least the stronger factions of all the colors, are somewhat even. And I'm obviously going to go into a bit more depth when I make a faction tier list, which I'm going to try and get out next week. So, finishing off this game, we have 2 cults, and maybe not a ton of network, but I think we're beating Halfling's network because they didn't end up building much. We missed Water 1, but we don't really care because we printed tons of points in round 4. Alchemists have a 16 network game. Xevox had a really cool Earth 2 Giants game. Halflings have made a lot of points, but we've made more. Halflings, the common dig round 4 print points faction have actually been outscored completely in terms of in-game points, but also cult and network by nomads. And I think it was a good showcase where the nomads, I guess, just knew that a traditional nomads game plan would work less well here, partly because of the map, partly because of the lack of scoring tiles in the game. I will point out we also got quite lucky, so there's that. Obviously, I was going to pick a game where the creative line won, and I also thought it was good to pick one of my own games because I could speak about my thought process a little bit more than if it was someone else's game. I obviously don't know what they were thinking. But hopefully the video hasn't been too long-winded and it hasn't just been me yapping because I do not have a script or anything. I just made some slides and hoped I could talk over them.